Have you ever noticed what happens when you stop replying right away? When you don't return the call? When you don't text back? When you don't show up where they expected you to be? On demand, like a tool waiting to be used? Something strange happens. Suddenly, the energy changes. The room shifts. People who once ignored your presence begin to feel your absence. They fidget. They panic. They ask, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" But the truth is, you just stopped performing. Most people aren't used to your silence. They're used to your yes, even when you meant no. They're used to your immediate reaction, your instant emotional availability. You were trained, from childhood, to believe that being accessible is being lovable, that showing up for others, no matter how tired, confused, or broken you feel, is the path to acceptance. And so you became the reliable one, the emotional sponge, the rescuer, the fixer, the pleaser. But here's a truth no one warned you about. The more available you are, the less visible you become. And the more they take, the less they value what they didn't earn. You become like air, always there, always expected, never appreciated. But the moment you withdraw, not in anger, not in revenge, just intentionally, the moment you choose presence over performance, silence over explanation, mystery over martyrdom, that's when the world around you panics. Because you broke the pattern. You stopped feeding them your energy. You stopped being a predictable puppet. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But what if everything that irritates others about you withdrawing is a mirror of their need to control you, of their addiction to your reaction, of their fear of facing their own emptiness, when your emotional oxygen isn't there to keep them afloat?" This is where the shift begins, in that sacred pause, that silence, that bold choice to stop being available for the wrong reasons. And let me ask you this, really ask you, who gets uncomfortable when you stop responding? Who becomes anxious when you don't explain yourself? Who accuses you of being distant, cold, or selfish, when all you did was step back and protect your peace? Those people aren't mad because you changed. They're mad because you stopped being convenient. And the truth is, when you stop being available to everyone, you start becoming valuable to yourself. From a young age, you were taught to be good, to behave, to adjust, to say the right thing at the right time. And slowly, almost without realizing it, you began wearing a mask that smiled when your heart was breaking, a mask that said yes when everything inside you was screaming no, a mask that became so convincing, even you started believing it was you. This is what Carl Jung called the persona, the image we craft for the world. It's not fake, it's not evil, it's just necessary. You see, the persona helps us survive. It allows us to function in society, to go to work, shake hands, play nice, smile on command. It gives us a way to be accepted. But here's the danger Jung warned us about. When you confuse the mask for the self, you start to believe your worth depends on how useful, how polite, how available you are to others. You become a performance, not a person. You smile even when it hurts. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. You explain yourself to people who never deserved your truth. You pick up every phone call, answer every message, show up for every crisis, even when you're drowning in your own. And over time, this availability becomes your identity. You're the one everyone leans on. You're the strong one, the nice one, the always there one. But ask yourself this: what part of you had to die so that this version could live? What pieces of your soul were silenced just to keep the peace? What truths were buried just to maintain an image? What dreams did you abandon because they didn't fit the character you were cast to play? And worst of all, who would still love you if you took off the mask? That's the fear, isn't it? Because deep down, the moment you stop performing, the moment you stop being endlessly available, the audience leaves. The calls stop. The affection fades. The admiration turns to discomfort. Why? Because the people who depended on your mask never really saw you. They loved the utility, not the human. Jung said that the persona is a compromise, a bridge between our inner world and outer reality. But when that bridge becomes a prison, you stop being real. You become functional. And the most dangerous part? You begin to believe that being functional is the same as being valuable. You equate love with sacrifice, connection with servitude, presence with performance. And so you stay available. Even when your body aches, even when your soul is dry, even when you are running on empty. You pick up the phone while breaking down. You answer texts during your anxiety attack. You smile through betrayal. You nod while being disrespected. But here's what no one tells you. Availability is not love. Obedience is not respect. Self-erasure is not connection. The more you contort yourself to meet others' expectations, the more invisible you become. They don't see your exhaustion. They don't sense your collapse, because you've trained them, that your pain is less important than their comfort. That is the trap of the persona. It's subtle, it's seductive, it's survival. But survival is not the same as living. So now I ask you, who are you beneath the mask? Who are you when no one is watching? What if the version of you that they love is killing the version of you that you are? That question, terrifying as it may be, is the beginning of freedom. Because freedom doesn't begin when you're accepted. It begins when you're willing to be rejected for the truth of who you are. To break the persona is not to rebel against the world. It's to return to yourself. It's to finally say, I no longer want to be chosen for my performance. I want to be known for my presence. And that presence? It begins the moment you say, I will no longer be endlessly available, not to everyone, not all the time. That is where your real life begins. That is where individuation begins. And that is where the next chapter of your soul unfolds. Most people think their exhaustion comes from doing too much, but the truth is, you're not tired because of what you're doing. You're tired because of what you're constantly giving away. You see, Jung didn't see the mind as a cold, mechanical machine. He saw it as an energy system, alive, dynamic, spiritual. Every thought you have, every feeling you absorb, every response you offer, costs you energy. And not just any energy, psychic energy. The subtle, invisible life force that fuels your focus, your mood, your decisions, your soul. But here's the secret no one tells you. This energy isn't infinite. It's limited, just like time, just like breath. Every time you rush to reply to a message you didn't want to read, every time you defend yourself to someone who's not listening, every time you say yes when your whole body says no, you're not just being polite, you're handing over a piece of your power. You spend your mornings worrying about conversations that haven't happened. You spend your nights replaying the things you should have said. You argue in your head with people who are asleep in peace, while you bleed psychic energy into the void. And you wonder why you feel empty. Because you're leaking, not from a wound, but from a pattern of reacting to everything, a pattern of believing you must respond, always, to everyone, for everything. But not everything deserves your energy. Not every trigger deserves a reply. Not every message deserves a response. Not every confrontation deserves your peace. Carl Jung warned that what you resist persists, but what you constantly react to consumes you. Because here's what most don't understand. The real cost of being available all the time isn't your schedule, it's your soul. Every time you let guilt drag you into a conversation, every time you let fear make your decisions, every time you keep people in your life out of obligation instead of alignment, you are betraying the sacred, your inner center, your psychic field. And do you know what happens when your psychic energy is always depleted? You become vulnerable, not just tired, not just drained, but easy to manipulate. Because manipulation doesn't always come from anger or aggression. It comes from need, from knowing you don't know how to say no, from knowing you're always one message away from emotional collapse. Predators don't hunt the loudest animal. They hunt the one limping at the edge of the herd, the one who's too tired to run. And that's what you become. When you give your energy to every problem that isn't yours, when you try to rescue people who don't want to change, when you confuse love with emotional servitude. Jung believed that a healthy mind is one that knows how to retain energy, not in selfishness, but in self-preservation. That means knowing how to say no without guilt, be silent without shame, walk away without explaining, disconnect without apologizing. Because the most dangerous illusion the world sells you is this, that being emotionally available 24/7 makes you good, that burning yourself out for others makes you noble. But Jung knew the truth. You cannot become whole if you are constantly leaking pieces of yourself into people, places, and problems that were never meant to carry you. So let me ask you, where is your energy going? Who has access to your nervous system today? And how many of your reactions are programmed, not chosen? The answer to those questions is the answer to why you're exhausted, why you feel disconnected, why you're not healing. Because healing begins where leakage ends, and peace begins when you realize you owe the world less than you think, and your soul more than you've ever given it. You were taught to say yes, to be kind, to be helpful, to be there, always there. But no one taught you how to say stop, how to protect your peace, how to build boundaries around the most sacred part of your being, your mind. The truth is, you were never too sensitive. You were just too open, too exposed, too available to every energy, every crisis, every projection people threw at you. You absorbed everything. You held space for everyone. You thought being available meant being valuable. But let's be honest, did it ever make you feel respected? Or did it just make you easier to drain? Carl Jung didn't talk about boundaries in the modern self-help way. He talked about them in energetic terms. He understood that to individuate, to become your whole, true, sovereign self, you had to cut cords, detach from the roles, the expectations, the emotional leashes others use to keep you obedient. Because here's the paradox no one wants to admit. The more emotionally available you are, the less emotionally free you become. Every time you answer out of guilt, every time you show up out of obligation, every time you explain yourself to someone who has no right to ask, you are reinforcing the idea that your emotions are for sale. Let me be blunt. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks. And you hold the key. When you say, "I'm not available right now," you're not rejecting anyone. You're respecting yourself. When you choose not to reply immediately, you're not ghosting. You're grounding. You're reclaiming control over your nervous system. And when you walk away from people who only reach out when they need something, you're not being selfish. You're being self-loyal. The people who get angry when you set boundaries are the ones who benefited from your lack of them. Let that sink in. They call you cold. They say you've changed. They accuse you of being difficult. But what they're really saying is this: I no longer have easy access to your energy, and I don't like that. Because people don't want you. They want your function, your emotional labor, your attention, your validation. And when you take that back, they panic. But that panic is not your problem, it's their lesson. Jung believed that individuation requires differentiation, to pull away from the collective, to disconnect from the swarm of social roles, to rediscover your essence through silence, solitude, and spiritual sovereignty. That's why withdrawal, when done consciously, is not weakness, it's war. A silent revolution against the inner slavery you've lived in for too long. Because the moment you say, "I no longer exist to manage your emotions," you are free. And freedom feels lonely at first. It feels quiet. It feels like losing. But it's not. It's healing. So stop explaining your number. Stop apologizing for needing rest. Stop reacting just because they expect you to. You do not owe anyone the parts of you that cost you your peace. Start slow. Let the phone ring. Let the message wait. Let people wonder. Because those who truly love you will respect your boundary, and those who only loved your availability will leave. Let them. You've said yes your whole life. Yes to the expectations, yes to the performance, yes to the emotional weight that was never yours to carry, yes to being available, always, to everyone, for everything. But something inside you is whispering now, whispering a truth you've buried for years, that every yes you gave to someone else was a quiet, trembling no to yourself. You see, the world doesn't reward authenticity. It rewards compliance. It hands out praise to the agreeable, the predictable, the obedient, and punishes the ones who begin to choose themselves. But Jung understood something that most people never realize. You cannot become who you truly are until you begin to reject who you are not. And that rejection? It begins with a word so small, but so sacred. No. No, I will not keep showing up for those who drain me. No, I will not reply when I'm exhausted. No, I will not smile when I'm angry. No, I will not perform for your comfort while I die inside. This is not rebellion. This is not cruelty. This is individuation, the slow, painful, holy path of returning to your center. The persona, the mask, was never meant to become your identity. It was meant to help you function. But somewhere along the way, you believed that the performance was your worth. So you became agreeable, accommodating, soft-spoken, pleasant, predictable. And now, when you say no, people flinch, they panic, they protest. But that's not because you did something wrong. It's because you broke the script. You stepped off the stage, and what happens next is sacred. You walk into the wilderness, not out of anger, but out of necessity. Because Jung's individuation requires isolation, not loneliness, but a conscious withdrawal from the noise of the world so you can finally hear the whisper of your own soul. This is the part no one talks about, the spiritual violence of growth. You will be misunderstood. You will be accused of being selfish, distant, cold. You will lose people. But you will gain something much more rare. You will find yourself. And when you do, you'll realize why boundaries felt like war. Because they were. A war between the version of you the world needed and the version of you your soul came here to become. Individuation is not just a psychological journey, it's a spiritual rebellion. It says, I will no longer betray myself to belong. I will no longer sacrifice my peace for proximity. I will no longer carry emotional debts I never signed up for. And as you begin saying no, you'll notice something miraculous. The noise fades, the guilt dissolves, the emptiness begins to heal, and in its place, you discover the stillness of sovereignty. A life that isn't about being chosen, but about choosing yourself. Because individuation is not a moment, it's a series of 1,000 silent no's, each one a step away from who the world told you to be. and a step closer to who you were always meant to become. So I ask you now, what is your next sacred no? And are you brave enough to say it? You've withdrawn. You've said no. You've stepped off the stage. And at first, it feels like silence. Not peace, not freedom, just silence. An eerie, unfamiliar quiet that fills the space where noise used to live. The phone doesn't ring as much. The messages slow down. The invitations stop. And for a moment, your mind panics. Did I just push everyone away? Am I becoming invisible? But breathe, because that silence isn't the sound of rejection. It's the sound of recalibration. You're not losing yourself. You're meeting yourself, maybe for the very first time. And what you're feeling is the detox, the withdrawal symptoms from a life of over-availability, the emotional hangover from being constantly accessible to others and perpetually absent from yourself. The people who used to flood your space with need, they begin to fade, not because they were evil, but because they were attached to the version of you that no longer exists. That version, the agreeable one, the fixer, the emotional first responder, is gone now. And in their confusion, they'll say things like, "You've changed. You're so distant. You're not who you used to be." But that's the point, isn't it? You're not. You're no longer emotionally available on demand. You're no longer performing love to earn love. You're no longer being the mirror for people who refuse to look at themselves. And that kind of change, that kind of unavailability, it terrifies people. Because your silence takes away their control. Your boundaries interrupt their pattern. Your self-respect exposes their dependency. Suddenly, you're no longer the easy fix. No longer the emotional vending machine, no longer the predictable supply of validation and attention. And that's when they turn. Some will criticize, some will guilt trip, some will disappear altogether. Let them. Let them misunderstand you. Let them rewrite the story if they need to. Let them go. Because this part of the journey is not about being understood, it's about being reborn. Reborn as someone who finally values their energy. Reborn as someone who finally protects their peace. Reborn as someone who no longer needs to explain their worth through their availability. Yes, it will be lonely, but not forever. Because the deeper you go into solitude, the more clearly you begin to see who actually loved you and who just loved your role, who respected your being and who just needed your service, who will walk with you, and who only stood beside you because they were leaning on you. This is not a loss. This is a filter. And what remains after that filter is real, is rare, is relevant to your soul's path. So here's the truth most people won't admit. Withdrawal hurts, but staying available to the wrong people hurts even more. One pain sets you free, the other keeps you chained. So choose your pain, choose your rebirth, because what happens after you withdraw isn't the end, it's the beginning. And you? You're finally becoming someone that not everyone can access, not because you're cruel, but because you're healed.